The cup that changed everything the morning was quiet in downtown San Francisco. A soft drizzle covered the sidewalks like a thin curtain. Sundar Pichai walked alone, wearing a plain gray jacket, his hands deep in his pockets. He looked like any other tired commuter, but inside his mind, a storm brewed. Google was facing one of its hardest weeks in years. Products had failed. Investors were anxious. And employees had started to whisper. Sundar didn't stop to think about his image. He just needed coffee. He turned the corner and walked into a small cafe called It Wasn't Fancy. The lights flickered sometimes, and the chairs creaked when you sat down, but it had warmth. It smelled like cinnamon and hope. Sundar liked that dot. There was a line. He waited quietly, scrolling through his phone. No one recognized him. That used to feel strange. Now it felt safe. Next, said a sharp voice. He looked up. The barista was a young woman with tired eyes and a black apron. Her name tag said Julia. One black coffee, please. Sundar said softly. Julia gave him a quick glance, then looked away. Her movements were fast and irritated. She made the coffee, pushed it toward him without a word, and just as he reached for it, she threw it. The coffee flew through the air, hot and wild. It hit Sundar in the chest. His shirt darkened, steam rising. Gasps filled the room. Phones came. Out for a moment, no one moved. Sundar stood still, shocked. The hot liquid soaking into his clothes. You think people like you can just walk in here? Julia said, her voice shaking. You think you can ignore what your company did to my brother? Everyone stared. No one knew what she meant. Sundar didn't say anything. He slowly took a napkin and wiped his hands. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I don't know what happened to your brother, but I'd like to understand. Someone in the crowd whispered, Is that Sundar Pichai? Phones clicked. Videos started recording. Julia single quotes. S lips trembled. Her eyes burned. You ruined him, she said. He worked for Google. He gave everything. And when he broke down, no one helped. He's in a hospital now. He can't even talk. The cafe was silent. Sundar looked down at the wet floor, then back at her. I'm sorry, he said again. I truly am. Julia didn't reply. She turned and walked into the back room. People began to murmur. Some were angry, others confused. One man stepped forward and said, You don't deserve that, man. Sundar nodded, said nothing, and left. Outside, the rain had stopped. He walked through the empty streets, feeling every drop of coffee cooling against his skin. His phone buzzed. Dozens of missed messages. The video was already online. The headline read, Barista throws coffee on Google CEO. Public meltdown. Comments exploded. Some said he deserved it. Some called for Julia to be fired. Some said nothing, just watched it on repeat. That night, Sundar sat in a small apartment he had rented to escape the press. He didn't eat. He didn't turn on the news. He just watched the video. Again. And again, he saw his own face. Calm, surprised, helpless. And then something caught his eye. In the background of the video. Behind Julia's rage and his silence, there was a boy sitting in the corner. A boy with familiar eyes. He blinked. Could it be? He zoomed in. His heart skipped. The boy looked like his own son, but he knew that wasn't possible. Was it? The screen froze on the boy's face, and suddenly nothing felt simple anymore. Asterisk. The face behind the Flemeth night stretched long and heavy. Outside, the city buzzed quietly, like it didn't know how to respond to the storm happening inside Sundar's mind. The apartment lights were off, except for the pale glow from his laptop screen. He had paused the video at the exact moment the boy in the cafe turned his head toward the camera. The image wasn't sharp. There was a shadow across the boy's cheek, and a coat collar nearly hid his face. But something about the eyes. They gripped Sundar like a memory trying to return. He couldn't stop staring. He leaned forward, adjusting the screen angle, almost as if doing so would bring the truth closer. The boy couldn't have been older than 10. Dark hair, quiet posture, hands clasped in his lap. He hadn't reacted during the chaos. While everyone else had turned to look at Julia screaming, or Sundar standing soaked in hot coffee, this boy had stayed frozen, as if already used to watching. The world burned down around him. Sundar's fingers moved slowly over the trackpad. He ran the video back, then forward, again and again. The boy didn't flinch once. Something about that stillness haunted him. He whispered to himself, "Why do you look like him?" Memories flooded his mind years back when his own son, Arjun, was that age. They used to take walks together in the morning before school. Arjun always held his hand too tightly, as if afraid the world might try to take him away. There were bedtime stories, spilled cereal, Lego pieces that always found a way to stab into his foot. All the little things but that boy in the video . It wasn't Arjun. He was sure of it. And yet, the feeling refused to leave him. Something inside him whispered that this boy wasn't a stranger. Maybe not by blood, but by something else. Something deeper. He didn't sleep that night by morning. The video had reached 2 million views. The news anchors called it the boiling point of big tech. Social media was ablaze with arguments. Half the people condemned the barista. The other half called it justice. Nobody agreed on anything, except one thing got something had changed on it. 8:03 a.m. Sundar stepped outside, wearing the same gray jacket, now washed and dried. He pulled his cap low and walked back to Bean and Soul. The drizzle had returned, as if the sky refused to stop crying over what had happened. As he reached the cafe, he noticed the windows were fogged up. The open sign was flipped to closed. Inside, chairs were stacked and the counter stood empty. He knocked. Nothing. He knocked again, louder this time. After a long pause, a figure appeared behind the door. It was the owner, a tall man with tired eyes and a soft expression. He opened the door slightly, peering through. "We're not open today," he said. "I'm sorry." "I'm not here for coffee," Sundar replied. "I need to speak with Julia." The owner hesitated. "She's not here. She quit. Left last night after everything went viral. Do you know where she went?" "I don't think she wants to be found." Sundar nodded, quiet for a moment. Then he said, "There was a boy here yesterday, in the corner. Do you know him?" The owner blinked. "The boy? Yeah, that's her little brother. Name's Noah." Something clicked. The name, the face, the emotion. "How old is he?" Sundar asked. 10. Sundar swallowed. "Is he okay?" The man tilted his head. "Quiet kid. Barely speaks. Ever since their parents passed, Julia's been raising him alone. Works 2 jobs. She brings him here sometimes when she can't. Afford a sitter." Sundar stepped back slowly, heart heavy. "Thank you." The door closed. He stood there for a while, watching the sky pour soft rain onto the sidewalk. His shoes grew wet, but he didn't move. Inside his chest, something was stirring. Guilt, confusion, a sharp awareness of how far his world had drifted from lives like Julia's. The boy wasn't his son, but in that moment, it didn't matter. He felt responsible anyway. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Find me everything on Julia Meadows." And her brother, Noah. There was silence on the other end. Then a hesitant voice replied, "Are you sure? This could look like retaliation. It's not. Just do it. But be careful. Respectful. No noise. No press." Hours passed. By the time the report arrived, Sundar was sitting alone at a park bench under a soaked tree. The wind carried the scent of wet leaves. He opened the file slowly. Asterisk Julia Meadows, 27, worked at Bean and Soul for 4 years. Studied computer science in college. Dropped out after her father passed away. Mother died 2 years later from cancer. Brother diagnosed with selective mutism. She had applied for a position at Google's support division 5 years ago. Wasn't selected. Her brother had a brief scholarship through a youth AI program under Google Outreach. The program was shut down the next year due to budget cuts. The same year, Noah stopped speaking altogether. Sundar closed the file. For a long time, he didn't move. Then he made a decision. He went home, opened his laptop, and began to write. Letter. Not an email, not a press release, not a real letter. One written with his own hand. He folded it, placed it in an envelope, and wrote 2 words on the front to Julia the next morning. He delivered it to the cafe in person, along with a request. When she comes back, please give this to her. The owner took it without asking questions. 2 days passed. No reply. On the 3rd morning, he received a message on his personal number. Unknown sender. The text read, I read your letter. Meet me tonight, 6 o'clock. Union Station, Platform 3. Come alone. His hands tightened around the phone. It was signed colon Julia ***. The platform where silence speaks Union Station was never truly quiet. Even in its slowest hours, the sound of distant footsteps, the low murmur of announcements echoing through the tunnels, and the occasional hum of trains slipping in and out of the platforms formed a kind of rhythm. But that evening, at exactly 6 o'clock, Platform 3 felt like a world apart, tucked in the shadow of concrete pillars and dim lights. A space where time waited rather than moved. Sundar arrived 5 minutes early. He wore a navy coat over a simple sweater, the collar slightly pulled up against the breeze drifting through the open tunnel. In his hand, he held nothing. No briefcase, no phone. He had made sure of that. When someone asks you to come alone, truly alone, and you care about what's about to happen, you listen. Asterisk. He looked around. The platform stretched in both directions, mostly empty. Just a janitor sweeping near the edge, a young couple holding hands near the stairs, and one elderly man sitting with his eyes closed. Then he saw her. Julia. She stood near one of the rusted columns, her back against the cold metal. She had a thick scarf around her neck and her hands tucked deep into the pockets of her coat. Her face was pale and tired, but her eyes were sharp, watching him. Unreadable. He approached slowly. When he was close enough to speak without raising his voice, he stopped. Thank you for coming, he said. I almost didn't, she replied. They stood there, silence stretching between them like a thread that might snap at any moment. He looked down at the ground. Your message surprised me. Your letter surprised me, she said. I thought it would be defensive. I thought it would be some polished excuse written by your legal team. I wrote it myself, he said quietly. I meant every word. Julia nodded once. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled something out. It was the letter, folded and slightly worn at the edges. She held it up for a second, then placed it beside her on the bench and didn't look at it again. You said you wanted to understand, she said. So I came. But you need to know I don't want pity. And I don't want a handout. I'm not here to offer one, he replied. For a moment. The station lights flickered. Then she spoke. My brother Noah used to be the kind of kid who talked to strangers at the grocery store. He was curious about everything. He'd ask how the scanner worked, why the receipt printed so fast, why the bags were plastic instead of cloth. I thought he was going to be an inventor. I used to tell him he'd make something that would change the world. She paused. Her voice dropped lower. When he was accepted into the Google AI learning program, it was the happiest day of his life. He walked around the apartment for hours, showing me the welcome email, talking about the robot he was going to build. He didn't even care that it was just a 6-week camp. It felt like a dream. Sundar listened without interrupting. But then she continued. Halfway through, the program was shut down. Budget cuts, you said in your letter. There were no goodbye letters. No check-ins. Nothing. It was like those kids never mattered. Noah kept checking his email for days, thinking there was a mistake. And then he just stopped talking. I thought he was being moody at first. I thought maybe he was just upset. But then days turned to weeks, and his silence never ended. She swallowed hard. We went to doctors, therapists. No one could explain it. They said it wasn't physical. They called it trauma-based selective mutism. He could speak. He just wouldn't. She looked at Sundar, her eyes shining but unblinking. Do you understand what that means? Your company wasn't just a logo to him. It was a doorway. He thought someone in your world finally saw him. And when that door closed, he thought the world didn't want him anymore. Sundar felt like the air around him had thickened. He took a slow breath. "I am sorry," he said. "I didn't know the impact was that personal. I never imagined." "That's the problem," Julia cut in. "You never imagined. No one at the top ever does." He nodded, ashamed. "I'm not angry because of the coffee," she said. "I did that out of hurt. I'm angry because he still looks out the window every morning, waiting for something to come back that never will." There was a long pause. The train on platform 4 arrived, then left. Neither of them moved. "What can I do?" Sundar finally asked, not as the CEO of Google. "Just as someone who failed?" Julia looked away. "I don't think you can fix him. I don't even know if he needs to be fixed. But maybe you can show him the world still sees him. That his voice matters even if he doesn't use it right now." She reached into her coat again and pulled out a small notebook. It was old, the corner folded, the spine cracked from years of use. "This is his journal," she said. "He writes in it every day. Pictures, code sketches, thoughts. Sometimes I think he talks more through this book than he ever did with words." She handed it to Sundar. He took it carefully, like it was something fragile. "Read it," she said. "If you still want help after that, maybe we talk again." Before he could respond, she turned and walked toward the stairs. He stood alone, on the platform, holding Noah's journal in his hands. When he got home that night, he opened it slowly. The first page was simple. A drawing of a small robot holding hands with a boy. Beneath it, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "He still waits for you, even if he doesn't know who you are." Sundar closed the book, his heart heavy. Then he opened it again, and read through the night. Asterisk, the boy behind the Cadete journal was unlike anything Sundar had ever read. It wasn't filled with sentences, not in the way most adults write. Instead, each page was a map of a child's mind, carefully drawn circuits. Tiny robots with uneven smiles, machines with arms that reached out but never touched anything. There were graphs labeled in a child's handwriting, some in ink, some in pencil, and scattered through it all were small stick figures of a boy sitting beside a box. Sometimes the box had a face. Sometimes it had wings. What caught Sundar most off guard, though, was how familiar it felt. Not in the drawings themselves, but in the questions written beneath them. How does a robot learn love if it doesn't have a heart? Why do things that start beautiful get turned off? If I don't speak, will they still hear me? He closed the journal gently, as if any sudden movement might erase the child behind it. He didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, as the city moved on with its fast cars and louder opinions, Sundar walked quietly into his office. Not the corner suite at the Googleplex, but a small satellite building he used for quieter thinking. He locked the door, sat at the desk, and spread Noah's journal out in front of him. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He started sketching. His lines were clumsy at first. He wasn't an artist, but he wasn't trying to be one. He was trying to build something, not for investors, not for product teams, just for one child who no longer trusted the world to listen. The idea came slowly. A small robot, basic but not ordinary. It would have a soft screen for a face, big eyes, and a learning core that could take emotional cues from written input. Instead of speaking, it would communicate through drawing, responding to emotions using sketches and written replies. A reflection of Noah himself, he named the prototype Echo, because that's what Noah needed, not a teacher, not a therapist. Just someone or something that would hear him and answer back in the language he used best. He worked on it. In secret for days, his hands tired, his mind stretched, but his heart full. Engineers noticed he was missing from meetings. His team asked questions, but he didn't explain. Not yet. Not until it was ready. He reached out to Julia again, this time with only one sentence. "I made something for Noah. May I bring it to him?" Her reply came after several hours. "Only if you don't expect anything in return." The following Sunday, under an overcast sky, Sundar arrived at a small apartment building nestled between an auto shop and a corner grocery. He stood in front of the door marked 2C, Holding a small case in one hand and Noah's journal in the other, Julia opened the door. She didn't smile, but she stepped aside to let him in. The apartment was modest, clean, but lived in. A half-finished puzzle lay on the coffee table, and a blanket hung over the back of the couch. The smell of tea and cinnamon drifted through the room. Noah sat cross-legged on the floor near the window. He wore a blue hoodie and had headphones on, though no music played. His eyes lifted when Sundar entered, but he didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't hide. Either. Julia gave Sundar a small nod, then went into the kitchen to give them space. Sundar walked over slowly and knelt across from Noah. He didn't speak. He placed the journal gently beside the boy. Noah looked at it, then back at Sundar. His expression didn't change. Then Sundar opened the case and took out a small robot. It was simple. Round head, small body, and on its face was a screen that flickered to life with two wide, animated eyes. Noah tilted his head slightly. Curious, Sundar placed the robot in front of him and turned it on. The robot's face lit up and a drawing appeared. On its screen, a stick figure boy sitting next to a box with wings. Noah blinked. Then slowly, his fingers moved. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a tiny pencil stub. He grabbed a scrap of paper from the floor and began to draw. He drew the same image back, but this time, the box had eyes. The robot's screen changed. It responded with a drawing of the boy standing beside the box, both smiling. Noah stared. Then he smiled too. Not wide. Not for long. But real. Julia peeked from the kitchen, and when she saw her brother's face soft, open, almost surprised by his own smile, her hand covered her mouth. Tears welled up in her eyes. But she said nothing for the next 30 minutes. Noah and the robot talked without a single word. They traded drawings, emotions, questions. At one point, the robot drew a heart. Noah looked at Sundar, hesitated, then pointed at him. Then at the heart. Sundar's eyes burned. He nodded slowly, and for the first time in a very long time, he didn't feel like a CEO or a name in headlines or a symbol of a system that had let someone down. He felt human. Just a man trying to make something right. Asterisk as he stood to leave. Noah gently placed the robot in his lap, looked up, and held up a small drawing he had just made. It was a robot holding a sign that said, "Thank you for finding me." Sundar didn't speak. He just smiled, nodded, and left quietly. As he stepped into the hallway, Julia followed. "Why did you do this?" she asked softly. He looked at her. "Because I should have a long time ago. Because sometimes the right thing doesn't scale, but it still matters." She looked down and nodded. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He's going to remember today for the rest of his life." "So will I," Sundar replied. They stood in silence for a long moment. And then, just as he turned to leave, Julia said one last thing. "There's something you should know." He turned back. Noah wasn't the only one who applied to that program. He was just the only one chosen. Sundar blinked. Julia looked away. "I applied too," she said. 5 years ago. Before I dropped out. Before everything fell apart. I just never told him. I didn't want him to know I'd been rejected too. He stared at her, unsure what to say. "Maybe it's not just Noah you're making peace with," she said quietly. Then she closed the door behind her. And Sundar was left in the hallway, feeling the weight of every choice he had ever made. Asterisk the world is watching. 2 weeks passed. Too quiet. Strange weeks. No reporters camped outside Sundar's apartment anymore. The video of the coffee incident had slowly slipped out of the trending cycle. Another scandal had replaced it. Another headline. Something louder. Flashier. But inside Sundar, the storm hadn't passed. If anything, it had only started to grow. He visited Noah and Julia 3 times over those 2 weeks. Never for long, just enough to keep the connection alive. Sometimes he brought books, sometimes tech sketches. Once he brought a bag of old circuit boards and broken watch parts, and Noah sat for an hour piecing them into something that looked like a beetle with copper legs. They never spoke, not with voices. But something passed between them each time. Something stronger than sound. Julia, for her part, remained distant, but no longer cold. They spoke carefully, like people who had once been on opposite sides of a shattered window and were now carefully sweeping up the glass together. One evening, as Sundar walked back to his car, he passed a mural painted on a wall near their apartment. It had been there forever, but he had never truly seen it until now. It showed two hands reaching for each other, the space between them filled with pieces of a broken circuit board. Underneath were three words, spray painted in red. Connection is repair. He stared at it for a long time. When he got home that night, he sat down with a cup of cold tea and wrote a speech, not for a product launch, not for shareholders, for the world, for the people who never made it into the rooms. He worked in for the Julias and Noahs who didn't get second chances. He knew what it would cost, and still. He wrote, 2 weeks later. He stood in front of a full audience inside a tech leadership conference hall in San Jose. The room buzzed with anticipation. Press, executives, startup founders, engineers. They expected announcements, updates, strategies. Instead, Sundar stood alone on the stage. No slides, no clicker. Just a microphone and a folded piece of paper. I was told not to give this speech, he began. A few laughs. Nervous ones. Was told that vulnerability doesn't play well in rooms like this. That admitting fault makes you appear weak. And for most of my life, I believe that. The room grew still, but a few weeks ago I was publicly humiliated. Not by a competitor, not by a hacker, not by a politician, by a barista. The room froze. Sundar let the silence hang. A barista who threw coffee on me in front of a room full of people. Someone recorded it. It went viral. The internet did what it always does. Some people laughed. Some defended me. Some defended her. And for a while I tried to ignore it. He paused until I couldn't anymore. On a screen, behind him, a simple drawing appeared. One of Noah's sketches, a stick figure boy, and a small robot holding hands. Soft murmur passed through the crowd. The woman who threw that coffee, her name is Julia Meadows. Her brother, Noah, once joined a youth AI program created by our company. It was supposed to inspire the next generation. But due to budget cuts, the program was shut down without warning. Noah stopped speaking after that. Literally, he hasn't said a word in years. Gasps now. This is not a press strategy. This is not brand recovery. This is me standing here saying I didn't know. And that is the problem. He stepped forward, voice steady. When you lead something big, it's easy to think in numbers, in dashboards, in quarterly earnings. But every number is a person. Every data point is a soul. His voice cracked slightly. I met Noah. He doesn't talk, but he listens. And through a little robot named Echo, he reminded me what technology is supposed to do. It's not supposed to impress. It's supposed to connect. The audience sat frozen. Many in the front row had lowered their phones. They were no longer trying to capture the moment. They were inside it. Starting today. He continued, we're relaunching the outreach program under a new name and a new promise. It won't be about grooming future workers. It will be about healing the future we forgot. A standing ovation didn't come right away, but one began. Slowly. First one person, then another, then more. Not because of applause lines, but because something rare had just happened. Someone powerful had stepped down from the pedestal by choice. Backstage, Sundar sat alone, breathing quietly. His hands shook. Not from fear, from something else. Release, relief, maybe even hope. A voice behind him broke the silence. That was ... unexpected. He turned. It was Julia. She had come. She stood in the back of the room during the speech, unseen. You spoke like someone who meant it, she said. I did, he replied. She nodded. Double quotes. Noah watched from home. He clapped when he saw the robot. Sundar smiled. He never claps. A pause. He also drew something while you were talking, she added. She handed him a folded paper. Sundar opened it. It was a drawing of the same stage he had just stood on. The stick figure version of himself stood behind a podium, arms outstretched. But next to him, Noah had drawn something else. A small robot. Floating above the crowd, holding a sign. It said, "Now they're listening." Sundar didn't speak. He didn't need to. Julia turned to leave. But before she walked away, she said one more thing. "You've done more than enough." He looked at her, then shook his head. Not yet. Later that night, alone in his apartment, Sundar opened his laptop. He stared at the screen for a long time before clicking on a private folder. Inside were two things. The full archive of the old outreach program. And a letter, a resignation letter. He read it over twice. Then he placed his hands on the keyboard. And began to rewrite it, not as surrender, but as a beginning. Just before midnight. He hit save, and outside, as the city fell into sleep, the mural near Julia's apartment glowed under the STREET. Connection. Is repair. But only if you're brave enough to stay in the room. After everything breaks. Asterisk. The boy who spoke without words. World moved on, as it always does. After the speech. After the standing ovation. After the headlines softened and the next scandal rolled in. The world kept spinning. But inside a small apartment tucked between an auto shop and a corner grocery, something had changed forever. A robot named Echo had become a permanent resident. It now sat on a small table by the window, next to a cactus and a stack of Noah's favorite notebooks. Every morning, before breakfast, Noah would turn it on. And every evening, before bed, he would place his hand gently on its head and whisper nothing, but say everything. Julia watched from a distance. She never asked Noah what they shared. She knew better now. Some languages are private, sacred, not meant for translation. Sundar continued to visit, though less often. Not because he was withdrawing, but because he knew the role he had played. It was no longer about him. He was not the center of Noah's story. He had simply lit a path and stepped aside so Noah could walk it on his own. He had officially stepped down as CEO of Google just 5 days after the conference. In the letter he sent to the board, he wrote, "It's time to lead smaller and love bigger." The message was shared online, and while some ridiculed it, others called it the most human line ever written by a departing executive. Didn't do press. He didn't write more. He just disappeared from the stage. And began building something quieter. The new outreach program launched 6 months later under the name KinCode. It was open source, decentralized, and co-designed with students, teachers, and people like Julia, those who had once been left out. The mission wasn't to train engineers. It was to make sure no one forgot they had something to give. Noah became the quiet heart of the project. His drawings formed a visual identity. His robot, Echo, became the centerpiece of a global conversation about emotional AI and digital empathy. And yet, still, he didn't speak. Not out loud. Not to strangers. Not to cameras. Until one day, everything shifted again. Asterisk, it was a Wednesday. Light rain painted the sidewalk silver. The event was meant to be small. A local gathering of KinCode kids from around the city, hosted in a community library near downtown. There were posters, juice boxes, laptops glowing with half-finished code. Sundar had been invited, but chose not to attend. He didn't want to distract from the real stars of the room, but Julia and Noah were there. Noah wore a simple navy hoodie and sat at the back, quietly building a new attachment for Echo. It was a small pen holder designed to allow the robot to draw on real paper. "I want him to be more like me." Noah had written his journal the night before, not just on screen.